Now, it's no secret that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been in a sad state for years. Ever since the conclusion of the Thanos saga with Avengers Endgame, it just seems like Disney can't quite get it right. They can't put it together like they did in those first couple of phases. And now, many years later in 2025, we have a new movie, Thunderbolts, which is getting a surprising amount of buzz. This movie has been getting great word of mouth and doing very well in the theater relative to the rest of the stuff Disney has put out this year. Now, I honestly haven't watched a Marvel movie in years, and I was gonna wait to check out the Fantastic Four to see if it really had what it took to restart the cinematic universe. But because everyone was raving about Thunderbolts, aka New Avengers, I decided to get my ass out of my computer chair, go to an in-real-life theater, spend actual money to sit down and watch this damn thing. Ladies and lads, Marvel Chads, it's time to discuss if Thunderbolts is actually worth the hype. Comment your thoughts down below as we go through this, because I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this movie. And if you haven't, I genuinely recommend you do, and let me discuss a couple of spoiler-free things first. Now, I think one of this movie's strongest suits is that the cast gave genuinely good performances all around. I can't really think of a weak aspect in terms of the main cast. They crafted a surprisingly emotional superhero movie, and that's why I think it works in large part, because much like the earlier Marvel films, it's kind of a genre piece first with a superhero skin on top of it. Huge shoutouts to David Harbour's character, the Red Guardian, because his comedic timing and really his massive heart and overperformance grounds all the rest of the characters who kind of keep it more serious, more in line with the tone of the story. There's some decent cinematography in here, some good set pieces, definitely better than the Black Widow film, and there's actually a surprisingly good script too. There's still those moments of Marvel quips, but they're very contained. And I'm not saying they're the best moments, but it keeps them bearable. Definitely the stronger moments of humor are the physical comedy, like I said, involving David Harbour, or even US Agent, the Walker character, I forget his first name, but he gains a lot from this movie. He's definitely become a crowd favorite with Marvel fans now. And I think that's a real testament to the strength of this movie, that everyone was walking in thinking, how are these bunch of nobodies gonna make anyone care about this movie? And then inversing that initial crowd reaction, the movie has made people care about all these characters. Really reminds me of the Self-Harm Squad on DC's side, and there's definitely parallels to be made there in the comics, but this movie, these characters, they're nothing like the comic book Thunderbolts at all. Now, the general theme of this movie is about rectifying your past and moving forward, and every single one of these main heroes has a messed up past. A lot of that is detailed in earlier movies and shows, but I actually think this movie does very well at being self-contained. You don't really have to go back and watch any of that material to understand what's going on here. The themes of the movie are really about learning to care about other people, not being so selfish, and kind of accepting the fact that people have multiple personas within them. And that's not actually too far from the themes of the comic book, so I guess it does maintain a core there. Now, from this point, I'm going to directly discuss the narrative, so this is the spoiler zone. Skip ahead to the time code on the screen right now if you want to see the discussion on the implications of this movie for the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward. Now, the Thunderbolts narrative focuses almost entirely on White Widow, Florence Pugh's character, and Florence Pugh's stock has risen immensely in Hollywood in the past few years, hasn't it? She's got a bidding war with WB and Disney going on right now. I actually think Avengers Doomsday and Dune 3 are coming out the same exact week in 2026, so I mean, she'll probably be the highest paid actress of that year. It's kind of crazy to see her come all that way from, what was it, Midsommar? Now, I'll also say I'm not actually her biggest fan, but I think that's the strength of this script here, is it actually made me like her more as an actress. Her delivery, her timing, her collaboration with David Harbour and the rest of the characters, she was very, very strong. She held the cast together very well. But there's something genuinely hilarious about seeing this little 5'1" midget leg whipping multiple people in that intro fight. She's probably the shortest Marvel hero ever in the movies, and she's out there hitting hurricanranas like Rey Mysterio at the SummerSlam. Now, the whole setup of this movie is that all these failed heroes, or these heroes with bad reputation from these past movies, are doing Black Ops missions for Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, and she's kind of acting as the Amanda Waller here. Though I guess the difference is that none of these heroes are actually prisoners or anything like that. There's no real consequence to them disobeying her orders. It's really just that they're kind of lost and don't have any other path spiritually, which lends into the themes of the movie later on. Now, Wyatt Widow is already having a change of heart at the very beginning of the movie, but with that classic one more job setup, they're set in to eliminate one target target, and this actually turns out to be a honeypot for all of these failed heroes. Louis-Dreyfus's character is trying to get them all to eliminate each other, and in fact, one of them does get eliminated, Taskmaster, and I really enjoyed this moment. It felt a bit like Self-Harm Squad, didn't it? Reminded me of when Pete Davidson's character, the director, knowing that people don't like the actor, decided to make him the first person to die in that film in hilarious and grotesque fashion. And the death of Taskmaster felt very similar. It was almost like the Disney producers acknowledging that they messed up with the way they did Black Widow. They messed up with this character, and they weren't even going to try to progress it forward. They weren't even going to try to continue with it. During all this commotion, they unintentionally release a random person from inside a pod who, spoilers, is Sentry, but they don't know that at the time. And though the expectation was for all these loose ends to clean each other up, they instead start to work together, and the first half of the movie ends up being an escape film. Like, they're trying to escape from the bottom of a bunker, learning to work together, and this is actually a pretty strong part. There's some really good dialogue in here. We learn a lot about the Bob Sentry character, and he's got a genuinely good performance as well. There's some quippy dialogue while they're actually trying to ascend the elevator to get out of this bunker, and that part gets a little cringy, but I think what works in this whole escape portion is that the actions define the characters. We also have Sentry constantly invading people's minds and revealing their darkest secrets, so it gives us an instant contrast between who they put themselves out to be and who they actually are inside. In storytelling terms, this is thesis and antithesis, which sets us up for later in the film to arrive at that synthesis. At this point, Louis-Dreyfus's character, who will now be called Veep, arrives at the scene, realizing that Sentry is still alive, and this was all part of what she thought was a failed experiment to create a super soldier. So she's not even really villainous, she's more of an opportunist, and though she's obviously evil, she's played in such a charismatic way that it's really hard to hate her. For better or worse, we have another one of those situations in a Marvel movie where the villain is just too damn likable. Bob decides to sacrifice himself so that his new friends can escape from Veep, and it is pretty noble because you gotta consider he doesn't even know that he has powers at all. He doesn't remember anything. The whole history of this character is that he was kind of a druggy vagabond and he was just drifting through Malaysia looking for a score. So even Sentry has a dark past, which will be revealed later. Now we move to the second half of the movie, which takes place almost entirely in and around a skyscraper. And I actually thought this was an interesting choice because, again, it's something that illustrates dichotomy. You have a bunker going down, you have a skyscraper going up. So in the first half of the movie, they're descending. In the second half, they're ascending. Oh my god, I know, filmmaking in a Marvel movie, right? But I also think it benefited this movie to keep the storytelling simple at two very well-defined locations. I'll breeze a bit more through this second half because it's very dense. The Veep character starts to gas up Sentry, telling him that he's a superhero, that she wants him, really getting into his head and manipulating him psychologically. So when the Thunderbolts realize that he's still alive, they go to rescue him, and they actually end up at odds with each other because he's got essentially godlike powers. Not omnipresence or omnivision, but none of them have any chance of defeating him, and realistically, no one in the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now has a chance of defeating Sentry, which in many ways leads itself to interesting questions in the future of the universe, and I think those implications are probably the best part of this film going forward. There's some pretty good moments in this initial fight where he just demonstrates that he could clearly kill the Red Guardian and then just decides not to. Or even bends Walker's knockoff Captain America shield, which then at the end of the movie makes it iconic. The bent shield becomes a part of the character. Again, using action to define a character, to tell story, much better than the weakest versions of the Marvel Cinematic movies. That's probably another strong suit of this movie too. It mixes the action and the storytelling very well. It feels very breezy, even though it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. Now after this point, Sentry just starts feeling himself and he completely disregards the Veep. He's gonna go do his own thing now that he's defeated the Thunderbolts. But thankfully her assistant saves her because Sentry was just gonna take her out and then probably take over the entire world. A great illustration of the dude's mental instability, and it just becomes a physical manifestation because after they use the kill switch, he becomes the Void. And I guess this is a major spoiler that Sentry is the Void, and it's always been like this in the comics. He has the power of a nuclear weapon, but he is a mentally unstable bipolar schizophrenic, which always begs the question of when is this guy just gonna destroy the entire planet? While all that's going on upstairs, the Thunderbolts have retreated downstairs and into the street, and they actually have a semi-Avengers moment where they're saving civilians, and they get their round of applause, they come together. It's a pretty heartfelt moment, especially for David Harbour's character, because a large point of his character is that he remembers the old days. I guess it's the perfect time to speak about how important his character was, and I think everyone who watches this movie will recognize he's the guy who really holds this whole family together, and seeing him get that moment of like genuine heroic celebration is pretty cathartic. However, the joy does not last that long, and Red Guardian, though getting the highest highs, also gets the highest lows with this one. And Void, aka Sentry, just starts to take over the entire Manhattan Island. Man, it's really gotta suck to live in Manhattan in the Marvel Universe. Something like this happens every other week, doesn't it? And I'll keep this part brief because it gets pretty emotional. It gets into like the histories of these characters, and this is where it benefits from you guys actually watching the movie. And White Widow actually manages to convince Bob to team up with her so they could hopefully fight the Void. And at this point it gets pretty on the nose metaphorical. Bob is beating up his negative self, his evil version of himself, and it's corrupting him while he's doing this. And the whole Thunderbolts team has to come together and teach him to love himself. And I know a lot of people were complaining about this narrative conclusion, thinking that it wasn't really appropriate for a superhero film, but after watching the movie, I think it was really the only way this movie could have ended. Ultimately, the whole movie is about learning to accept yourself and move on, the fact that you are what you do, and if you want to become a better person, you just have to do better things. So ultimately, I think this ending really worked, and it was a great moment of catharsis for the Sentry character and every other one of the Thunderbolts. It put them in a much better position, gave them a much higher level of likability. People actually know who these characters are now, and I gauge that by the amount of memes that I'm seeing around the Thunderbolts. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I haven't seen memes for 90% of the stuff Marvel has put out since the lockdown era, but the amount of genuine buzz for Thunderbolts is really what made me go see this movie, and I think it was definitely warranted. However, the implications of this movie are more intriguing to me. So the Veep actually tricks these Thunderbolts into going out to a press conference instead of arresting her, and now she has commissioned the new Avengers. She's positioned herself essentially between a rock and a hard place where they kind of have to rely on her for continued relevance, but if she betrays them, they can absolutely squash her. And when we take the end scene into account, where apparently Sam Wilson has gotten his own Avengers together and he's suing the new Avengers for the licensing, we're kind of leading up to a battle of sorts, and Doomsday is going to be next year in December, by the way. They did move this date, but it does mean that the implications of this movie are going to be felt almost immediately. The second end scene, and yes, they are doing multiple end scenes in these credits now, it shows that the Fantastic Four are going to have to flee their world and come to the main Marvel universe, so expect the Fantastic Four movie to be a genuine disaster for that world. They're totally going to fail and have to run away. We also have all these confirmations of the old X-Men cast from the early 2000s returning to their roles, and Disney is definitely banking hard on nostalgia to carry the next couple years of Marvel movies. But at least with the Thunderbolts, I think the quality is actually there. This is the first movie to feel like a genuine time skip from that Avengers Endgame period. I know there's 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame, but after that it feels like every show and movie could have taken place in the same exact month. With the Thunderbolts, it felt like a deliberate attempt to put some space between the two eras of Marvel, and that whole post-Endgame era was just a wild ride of multiversal nonsense, and truthfully speaking, it just went horrible for Marvel. They had multiple flops on Disney Plus and in theaters. They had the whole Kang the Conqueror legal drama, which essentially stuffed that storyline. They created a bunch of shows about characters that nobody liked, nobody watched, and characters that'll probably never be in the Marvel Universe ever again. Their desperate attempt to create an all-females new Avengers wasted so much of their money. And I briefly mentioned it before, but I think the first misstep was how they handled that Black Widow movie. For some reason, they got it in their head that the Captain Marvel movie was way more important, that it had to be a part of the Thanos arc. Maybe it's because Brie Larson is an award-winning actress, but she is far from a crowd favorite. And ultimately, that Black Widow movie was terrible. It was released directly to Disney Plus, and the way they did that completely soured Disney's working relationship with Scarlett Johansson. That was her moment to get a Robert Downey Jr. payout, having been in the franchise since pretty much the very beginning, and Disney playing it dirty like that really set the tone for like the next 5 years of their productions. I'll have to go back and watch the new Captain America movie to see if it feels at all similar, but given the production of that movie, I don't have a lot of hope. The current arc seems to be new Avengers versus Avengers until the X-Men arrive, and maybe Doom will be playing them against each other while Fantastic Four tries to fight them in the background, and it remains to be seen if Marvel really has the writing talent to keep it as streamlined as they did in the first couple phases. Because at some point it goes even further than that. Galactus will become relevant, we still have Loki up in the air, and many other questions around, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, the whole magical aspect of the Marvel Universe. It's all very amorphous at this point, which is probably best because I feel Disney, Marvel's biggest flaw is over-planning. They look so many years and so many projects into the future, you end up with situations like Ironheart, where you've made an entire film that no one really wants, so you end up having to recut it into a Disney Plus series, and that's not the way to make a good show. I don't know if the Marvel Cinematic Universe will ever reach the heights that it hit with Endgame, multiple $billion, but I can at least say that the direction Thunderbolts is promising us is a decent one, and the movie itself is enjoyable at least. Now comment down below how you felt about the Thunderbolts movie. How do you feel about the current direction of the Marvel Universe, the past 5 years of the Marvel Universe? And be sure to subscribe, because I'm gonna go back and watch the new Captain America movie, do a review on that. I'll be reviewing Fantastic Four and all the movies that come out in the future, and I will be taking a journey through all the old Marvel movies as well to see if they actually hold up.